We're going to start with our cold open, which is, we just lost Rich. Rich is back. Rich and Mike are going to go back and forth in 1 minute with as many examples of how we're failing or how we have to deal with cloud access. Are you guys ready? Here we go.
Ready.
Here's a countdown to start off the clock.
Thousands of permissions.
Passwords.
Okay.
Developer full stack access.
Privilege account management.
Just in case access.
Roles and responsibilities.
Permissions creep.
SAML.
Cloud service providers adding new services daily.
Password recovery or resetting passwords.
Toxic combinations of permissions.
Trust.
This is impressive. Keep
Service accounts outnumber human accounts.
Biometrics and tokens.
Poor key rotation.
Credential spraying.
Whoa.
Cross account access.
Account takeovers.
Dormant resources that are never retired.
Mobile phones.
10 seconds.
Lambda serverless functions exposing web interfaces and APIs.
Authorizations.
3 seconds. Get the last one in.
Misunderstood permission set.
Oh, very good. Hold on. Why am I not? There we go. Excellent job, guys. That was good. Andrew, who's in the back, tell us how many did they get, and did anyone win here with the number?
22.
22 total?
And that was a tie.
22 for each of them?
No, 11 per person.
11 each. Oh, great.
Yeah.
Very impressive, gentlemen. Very impressive.
Thank you.
I must say. All right. Well, welcome everybody to Hacking Cloud Access. Let's hear the opening music.
Welcome, everybody. The CISO Series video chat is ready to begin.
Hey, everybody. I'm David Spark, and welcome to our Friday CISO Series video chat. We just set the stage for our discussion today, which is hacking cloud access, an hour of critical thinking about how managing permissions is complicating our ability to secure our environment. All right, our guests today, who you just saw, are Mike Rago, who is a cloud security expert over at CloudKnox, and Richard Rushing, CISO for Motorola Mobility. Our sponsor for today's episode is CloudKnox. Thank you so much, CloudKnox, for sponsoring. Actually, not the first time you've sponsored one of these video chats, so welcome back. All right, for those who've never been a part of one of our video chats, let me educate you on the ways you can participate, because as you will see, tons and tons of different ways you can participate, and we have a live chat room right now, so awesome. You can just participate in the chat room. You can submit bad ideas and vote for your favorite. You'll do that 20 minutes past the hour. You also, I didn't add, you can actually include good ideas. Actually, there'll be 6 different ways. You can join us on video at any time with just typing in "Bring Me On" if you got a question or a comment to make. Ask a question at any time. Just click on the button, ask a question, or vote for your favorite question, because if a lot come in, well, I need to know which ones are your favorites for that matter. All right, very quickly, here's the schedule. We're going to play the speed round. We did that already. Your bad ideas and questions. Please get your bad ideas in. The person with the absolute best bad idea, which I determine over the weekend, and then I'll let you know next week, and we announce next week, gets this really cool CISO Series fleece. Could be yours. Repeat winners get an Amazon gift card. All right. At 20 minutes past the hour, poll live, and you'll vote for your favorite bad idea. Also at that time, we'll shift from bad ideas to good ideas around cloud access. So please put bad idea, whatever your bad idea is, and then good idea or good strategy, and whatever your strategy is around cloud access, because we do want to hear that. All right. Then we will play Beat the Bad Idea. We will try to put controls around your incredibly horrible ideas. So if you try to come up with a bad idea that you don't think could be controlled, and to challenge our contestants here. We'll vote for your favorite questions. And then the 2 bad ideas that I choose, I want the people who submitted them to come on camera and defend their bad ideas of why they're so horrible. And our 2 guests will we'll judge which is the worst. Last questions and final advice, and then we will go into our meetup with our cyber security speed dating. Next Friday, I also want to promote our video chat that's happening next Friday. That's going to be Hacking Process, an hour of critical thinking about delivering and receiving the right information to the right people at the right time. The button to register for that is at the very bottom of the screen. You see it right there. Join us next Friday for Hacking Process. You can click on that at any time during this video chat. It will not take you out of this video chat. It'll open another window. You can register for that to get ready for that. And then let me just remind you, stick around for the meetup if you've never been a part of it. It is a ton of fun. All right, enough of that. Let's get to the actual discussion on time. Hacking Cloud Access. I got to say, by the way, kudos to both of you for slamming in all those sort of examples of cloud access. And I'm guessing you could probably added a few more. So let's just start. I'll start with you, Mike. You listed off a lot of issues. What is the overarching concern we need to know about all the sort of cloud issues that you threw out there?
Yeah, if you look at the Cloud Security Alliance and the recent report they had, one of the systemic risks and really the underlying systemic risk is really around permissions and assignment of those permissions, allowing over-permissioned access to a plethora of cloud resources. Well, although on the front end we may look at, how those are shared out like an exposed S3 bucket or something of that nature, on the back end, how that's permissioned, how that access is given out really stems from how you assign those permissions in the first place.
So permissions, would you agree with this, Richard? Is that,
Yeah,
it all boils down to that?
There's a lot of different moving parts, but at the end of the day, again, if I'm taking from a insider threat perspective, an attacker perspective, or anything else, I want the most permissions, because if I don't have permissions and I take over an account, can't do anything with it. So it's one of those things that people are constantly trying to get is the high level permissions levels. And that's the key. If I can get in and I have authorization to it, I'm just a jump point from your internal network, even in a cloud environment in some of those areas as well.
So I'm thinking about the multitude of complications. So you listed off 22 issues, of which I'm sure there's more, or essentially 22 different sort of vectors, if you will, in our game at the very beginning. And then you also have all the permissions attached to all the 22 things. Then you have all the people with the permissions attached to the 22 things, and probably more for that matter. All of this sounds like this is not a humanly manageable thing to deal with. How does one manage it, realizing that you've got this sort of exponentially exploding issue? Mike?
Yeah, right. And another key thing, in addition to everything you mentioned is, these cloud service providers are adding new features and permissions daily as well. So in addition to everything you mentioned, how do you keep up with all of this? And I think fundamentally, it just begs the need for automation and furthermore, visibility. So how do I look at my environment and determine, am I over permissioning access? Am I providing that access based on how maybe the organization has traditionally done things, such as, kind of tribal knowledge about how we give out permissions to folks, to maybe some kind of loosely defined security baselines, and start to think more about least privileges and zero trust, which a lot of people are focused on today. And a lot of that stems from visibility into activity and distinguishing what permissions have been assigned to what we're actually seeing people use. I know a lot of risk assessments we do really exposes the fact that on average, the average user is using less than 5% of the permissions assigned.
Rich, are you running into this issue as well?
Yeah. There's a couple of different areas on that. Is that one, every single cloud service provider globally has a different permission structure that's there. And so a lot of times when organizations come from one environment to another environment, they replicate permissions that they think they need or anything else. There's some real classic examples of it. We won't name names to protect the innocent or guilty discharge, but there's some where it says, hey, I want everyone that to have this level of responsibility. And what that everyone equated to was anyone in that cloud platform, regardless of your organization or someone else's, to give them the permission to access that. And so those cycles and changes are there. And as Michael pointed out earlier, trying to manage those permissions, and people tend to over permissions because of inexperience, or this was a dev environment, this is now a production environment, and here's the administrators. It's kind of, at the end of the day, it's like, hey, we just give all access, or way too much access for levels of people to actually do. And to his point, most of it's never even used.
Let me throw some concern around the automation element. Later today, we're going to be recording an episode of Defense in Depth talking about people's fear of automation. And honestly, I can't remember the report, but I remember reading a report saying that one of the reasons people are struggling to automate is because they need to staff up to be able to automate, rather than the promise that automation was, if you automate, then you'll actually reduce staff. And so there's this fear of getting in because you need the expertise and or you feel you need the expertise to do it. And so therefore you need more staff to do it. And then at the same time, there's the fear of, I still need my hands on this some way. There still needs to be an individual's judgment on it. So what do you say to those people who have that sort of level of fear or concern of, I need to staff up before I need to do this? Mike?
Yeah, I think when you think about automation, a lot of people are doing this manually today. And so if you can, design automation, and this exists today, right, around the ability to say, these are the permissions assigned over the last 90 days. These are the permissions I've seen used, to use that to calculate some least privilege policies and push that out in the environment. I mean, that can happen, autonomously or semi-autonomously, where you can have a human in the loop to kind of, validate that. But the ability to calculate, a policy within these cloud service provider environments is very sophisticated, right? It's lots of lines of code within a JSON policy, and trying to calculate all of that takes a lot of time. We work with some of the largest organizations in the world, and they've been trying to do that manually by combing through logs and distinguishing what permissions people are using. Automation can pull that all out for you and calculate that least privilege policy. It doesn't necessarily have to have the easy button and push that out automatically. That can be a human in the loop, kind of a peer review type of thing. But whether it be, at the, stage of, how you're assigning those permissions, or if you're a very sophisticated environment where you have a CI/CD pipeline and you want to incorporate that, the automation exists around a lot of that today to really help provide more proper access in terms of what's actually being used, and decommission a lot of those permissions not being used. And we can talk more later about how you complement that with privilege on demand.
Well, I do want to come back to really the specifics of what actually is being automated and what's actually happening. But let me ask you, in your environment, Richard, what was the fear level, concern about doing any, and it could be just automation for this or any automation, just like, where do you guys approach it?
I think people approach, unfortunately, automation badly in the organizations, and a lot of times, because there is an inherent bias around automation, because you're taking humans out of the loop. So the initial assumption when we automate is that it actually has to be 100% correct. But at the same day, I'm like, administrators make mistakes, people make mistakes, everything else. Just assume the mistakes are going to be made on that side of it. And don't automate things that you don't know that you already have kind of a recipe for. If you know exactly what you're going to do, there's no reason to not be able to automate that correctly. And any exceptions during that automated process, back to Mike's point, go into a peer review, go into someone else's review. So if I had 1,000 accounts to go make changes to, 998 of them were successfully done with automation, and 2 exited out of that. I'm only doing 2 of those work. So you do get the benefit of focusing around of reducing the amount of human effort that's required, or in that side of it, and not making mistakes, because the automation process is going to do exactly what you tell it to do. Not, I forgot to hit save, or I forgot to check a checkbox of some of those things. And I think if you approach it from an aspect that I'm going to automate stuff that I have a recipe for, and anything that is custom done or needs some that doesn't match up, put it to a human factor. You'll get success by reducing your workload on that. At the same time, you're not going to make mistakes in trying to squeeze things into the side of it.
Are there, and by the way, I'm surprised no questions have come in. Hey guys, throw us some questions. We'd love to hear them. And we are 14 minutes past the hour, so get your bad ideas in now if you want them to be considered for the poll. We have 6 more minutes before that, and then we'll be switching to good ideas, for that matter. And if you haven't clicked the button at the bottom of the screen to register for next week, please do that and join us. All right, let's just talk specifically about the permissions themselves. around the cloud. Is there, I mean, do we have control over everything? Is there something that we don't have control over, Mike?
Yeah, when you take a look at some of these cloud service providers, 10,000 permissions by default. And if you're assigning permissions kind of using, well, just in case, I'll give out all of these additional permissions that you might just in case need, is kind of where the problem kind of begins with, right? But it does require, a thorough understanding of, what all those permissions mean. Does anybody, really understand all of those 10,000 permissions? Do they provide the ability for privilege escalation? Do they provide the ability for a user to create another user account for themselves as an insider threat or for another developer? Understanding those permissions is very, very difficult, and distinguishing of those permissions, which ones are high risk and which ones are not, are also really, really difficult. So automation in that regard really comes in handy in helping categorize those permissions so you can make better decisions regarding, what types of permissions or what groups of permissions you are or are not going to give out.
Mm-hmm. And do you struggle with this yourself, Rich, in terms of what you can and can't handle?
I think it's one of the things that goes through that is that you have to have the right resources, and you also have to have an ideas of what you're actually wanting to do and procedures that are around that. I think one of the most dangerous things you get into is when people start jumping in and doing things in a cloud environment as they potentially would do in a data center environment or an on-prem environment. And it's very different in that. And I think that's where ends up a lot of mistakes. They will change something at the level where you're changing it, not necessarily at the application or the build level. They just go and think we're just using this on a server. And cloud is all about elasticity and scale. So if I make a change in one spot and it doesn't ripple through the whole platform, you start running into those issues where, hey, this is not working the same way as this one is. And now you're lost because you don't know where everything is actually changed. And I think visibility is one of the keys. A lot of times it's kind of the visibilities in the DevOps team, the visibilities in the prod team, and that you can't see inside of that. So you kind of hope and pray that they're doing the right thing. And there's not this trust and verify kind of scenario, because you probably do trust your team. The question is, are they able to actually verify things are going on and everything else? Because for their side of it, they're trying to get their job done on a daily basis. And if something's happening, their job is to fix it and fix it fast. And sometimes that leads to a lot of mistakes being made in some of the process, especially when you're not doing it through an automated process.
All right. Brian Solari of App Omni has this question. I'm going to throw this to you specifically, Mike, because this has to do with sales, actually. And tell me if you actually do get this, you hear this, or it's very possible people don't admit to saying this, but you can sense it. Mm-hmm. And Brian asks, how do you sell the use of automation to a candidate or to candidates who see automation as a threat to their long-term job security? Now, A, do you see this, or do you sense it? Or neither?
Sometimes, we sense that. And it's a very valid question, right? I think when we think about automation, most of the organizations we work with today are overwhelmed with projects, overwhelmed with data, right? So this typically is more of a case in which we're helping them so they can spend more time on some of the other projects, right? Where they can leverage the automation of what we're providing to ease the workload and focus efforts on things that are more time consuming, right? And to make it much more accurate and easy to use.
I can't imagine anyone saying, no, I want to spend more manual time managing permissions.
Right, precisely.
No one's saying that. But honestly, one of the things that I read, a quote from somebody else, and my apologies not remembering who said it, but someone on LinkedIn said, if you know automation, you've got job security. You know what I mean? Like that is the thing that's going to bring you more job security than anything else, not having sort of a unique skill to manage permissions for that matter. Let me throw this question out we got from, and this actually references something that you said, Mike. How do you keep up with, well, I'll start with you, Rich, on this. How do you keep up with with the changing permissions that are constantly being added to the different cloud services? And how painful is that? Maybe it's not too painful. You tell me.
It's not necessarily too painful, but you really have to understand it. And the team actually has to understand the new permissions. They're added for a reason. And it's usually to deprecate like an overarching permission or something else. You're splitting things or you're adding something new as part of that. And I think that's one of the key areas that you get into issues with and it's kind of twofold. One, by adding another permission that probably relates to another service that's offering, and your cloud architects or anything else are like, oh, good, new service. Let me incorporate it into the platform that's actually there, and we'll run really quick and go, yeah, guess what? We're standing up this new service. And you're like, okay. But I think from the idea of the permissions and managing it, it is really critical. And I think it's hard to understand because you don't necessarily know the trickle down effect that may actually occur in these environments. And a lot of times we used to have really good prod, dev, different environments that you can build up into these things. And now that's actually condensed down very, very short. So trying to test it and appropriate it before it goes live is one of those things that's often hard to do. And then rolling that across your platform. It's one thing when there's 100 users. It's another thing when it's 100,000 users that's around that. And that becomes part of the issues of, do you want to break 100,000 users? And we've all done it. Trust me on that. It's like, oh, can't log in anymore. Okay, bad move. So I think that's one of the issues as well.
All right, let me just mention that it is now 20 minutes past the hour, and the poll is up. So please vote for your favorite bad ideas, because in just less than 10 minutes now, we will play Beat the Bad Idea. But more importantly, we're shifting from bad ideas to good ideas. It's your strategy. Interested to know your strategies, and I will call them out as I see them coming in the chat room. Your strategies for dealing with cloud access issues. Do you have other takes on it purely off of how you're managing permissions, or what are you doing to sort of manage your permissions easier? Or is there another angle you're taking altogether? Give no one access to anything. That's probably a bad idea that someone already suggested out there. And a couple more questions came in. All right. From Kevin Hackinson, he asks, in addition to permissions, there are also resource constraints, step up authentication, timer or location limitations. How much does this help versus just make things harder to manage? And maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, maybe this information is what helps you make better automated decisions. Yes?
It does. Yeah. It's all stitched together such that it can be both a blessing and a curse. Right. And, by looking at resources, time constraints, other things can really, really help from a positive perspective. So here's an example. Let's say that someone needs access to run a batch job in the cloud, and you want to provide that access. But how do you do that on a time-based perspective, right? With automation, you can set a timer by which that permission is later removed so it doesn't get left behind. How many organizations have set up access but later forget to remove it, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody, right? I mean, let's face it. So automation in that case is your friend, and in the context of resources, there can be so many different types of policies, ranging from inline to all different types of policies, right? Stitching that together is very difficult. I just was working with a customer this morning. We did a risk assessment for trying to determine, how do I remediate a lot of that? Trying to stitch that together is also very difficult when you have policies coming in from different perspectives, all stitched together within that cloud service provider. Again, automation is your friend, right? So if it can make sense of all of those different policies combined to understand the effective policies, that's something that's a lot more attainable versus combing through logs and other things to try to distinguish that.
So, Rich, I want to ask you, and maybe a tag to Kevin's question, and that is, since you started, and I'm assuming you are automating permissions in your environment to a level, walk us through what your situation was before and now. What are you either not doing? What has made your life easier? What do you feel that you've better managed? Like what is the state of your situation now versus before?
I think there's several areas that we struggle with, and even today we struggle with on that. I think one of the biggest areas that a lot of organizations are continually struggling with is cloud changes so rapidly and so fast. From an architectural design perspective, designing things that are new, you end up with everything included the kitchen sink, from the resume building of, hey, we want to use Kafka, we want to use this and Kubernetes and all this other stuff. You don't need it. The other thing is data hoarding was one of the key areas, as people will go, well, I'll reach out and grab the data and bring it in. And most of the time, microservices and APIs, hey, I can go request the information I want to and leave it where it is. Leave it in another cloud platform, SaaS platform, whatever it is, that leave it where it's at instead of bringing it down to try to use it, because their assumption is, well, I may need it again. So why do I want to be able to do it? But at that same time, you increase your storage cost and you increase the data. And now you have more things in different areas. The automation aspect of things, I think, goes from, hey, when can you, especially we use it in elasticity. Again, Christmas holidays, Father's Day, different national holidays come up. Those are our big sales cycles. So our e-commerce platform is in the cloud for that reason, is that, hey, we can scale to meet this. Otherwise, I have 3,000 servers that are not doing anything for 360 days out of the year. And so how do I automate that scale? How do I automate the workloads to say, hey, we're at capacity, we need to spend up some more instances and everything else? So a lot of that is into some of the telemetry and everything else. I think from a security perspective, one of the things you constantly struggle with is logs. And it's like you say the L word, and it's like, oh my gosh. In the cloud environment, it was like, I have this one, I have this one, I have my cloud trails, I have my firewalls, I have my application, I have microservices. And you're like, how do I stitch this together to actually see what's actually going on and be able to do it? And I think that's one of the key areas that also parts of automation really start helping with, is like, I could see something, but now as you dig into it, it's like, I got to go collect all these things from all those places. And if you do it kind of after the fact of something bad has happened, something crashed, your environment, you're trying to pull the logs back, that's not the time to try to figure all this stuff out. You should have already figured it out and how to trace that. And I think some of those are the key attributes from running the environment itself and how to do the automation in that. So if one of my servers is doing something bad, I don't log into it and try to figure it out necessarily. If it's a performance issue, they shut the server down, bring a new server up and see if that is still correcting the problem. Because if it was good at one time and now it's not working, there's probably something going on, but I can bring up a new server at that point in time and I'm now back to the normal process. Versus in prem, which everybody's still kind of clutching to, is, oh, let me log in and start troubleshooting that on that particular server. When you can go, I can spin up 100 of these. So why am I trying to figure out what's that? Just isolate it, bring something else up. And I think that is a different thought process as well as a response process, that cloud is different and you got to treat it as such.
Let me throw one more question before we go to our last game here, or our next game. Larry Rosen asks, is there one common mistake you see companies make as they move to the cloud, other than the classic issue of not changing process/controls to address unique cloud issues? I'm going to throw this first to you, Mike, and just give me a quick answer here. Obviously, you see, when a potential customer comes to you, you're seeing what their issues are. What is, I guess, the most classic mistake? And it may be things that you mentioned at the beginning of the show.
Yeah, I think one of the key things that we frequently see is the pace at which people are developing in the cloud and spinning up stacks, and the level of access that developers have. It's very, very different from, kind of an on-prem perspective. So, many years back, Richard and I both taught ethical hacking, classes. And one of the byproducts of that class was always thinking about, say that maybe around the year 2000, thinking beyond the firewall, right? Which is, hey, I've got a firewall in place now. I took your ethical hacking class. Can you provide any other ideas about other layers of defense that I should be looking at now, whether it's IDS, malware protection systems, et cetera? Fast forward to today's world and the pace at which we're moving, we find organizations we're doing risk assessments for are now thinking beyond the perimeter, because again, where we started at the beginning, where the Cloud Security Alliance highlighted 11 recent breaches, these were all beyond the firewall. This was more than an exposed S3 bucket. This was a lot more about what other layers of defenses should I be looking at. And as a result, in bringing that full circle back to your original question, and kind of what we see in doing these risk assessments is that people are moving at a pace like they've never moved before. Traditionally, when you would build out the data center, like Richard was alluding to, we all know, you would have a networking team, a separate team that would build out the database, another team that would build out the servers. Now developers have access to that whole stack. There's not individual teams building that out anymore. And a stack like that can be built out in 15 minutes or less. So at the end of the day, it's really about looking at a lot of that permission set. Do developers really need that level of access? And using that as the fundamental strategy to shore up your perimeter security, internal security, and your fundamental security in general.
Rich, you want to add to that, and then we're going to run to our game.
Yeah, I think it's interesting from my perspective. There's two things. That one is the lift and shift environment where people are taking systems out of data centers and putting them into the cloud. They don't take into account the millions of dollars of security hardware and software that sits at the perimeter around that data center. They just say, it's an application. I pick the application up. I put it in the cloud. I press the on button and I'm good to go. All that pieces of data center, from firewalls to WAFs to all this other stuff, may not be configured in the cloud environment that he just stood it up in. And that's there. The other thing is that you're on the internet when you're in the cloud. They go and make changes like, oh, let me create this test account really quick, and I'll select the wonderful password of like test123, and I'll start doing some data analysis and everything else. And then all they end up with is somebody coming, doing brute forcing and go, oh, look, account, let me try test. Oh, boom, logged in. And the server's now crypto mining for you. Or not for you, but for the bad guys. So I think that's one of the things, is that you're on the internet. So you need to treat that as that. Don't make stupid mistakes on that side of it just because you don't think anybody's watching, because they are. And you will get busted. It's about 13 minutes. Try it yourself. Stand up something that's arbitrarily in any of the clouds. 13 minutes later, it's mining crypto. So just that you have to be careful with that. And if you lift and shift stuff, put everything that you had before into the same environment that's actually there. Otherwise, you're going to be mining crypto at some point in time in the future.
All right. Don't mine crypto unless that was your plan to mine crypto. Yes. In other words. All right. Hey, wait. This just came in.
It's time to play Beat the Bad Idea.
All right. We have some pretty good bad ideas that came in. I must say, I'm impressed. If you haven't voted, please vote. I'm going to start with this very first one. And also, please speak up if this is your bad idea, because we're going to want you to come on at about 45 minutes past the hour to defend why your bad idea is the best. And actually, I'm going to need a clearer explanation of this, because it sounded like you created a term. So, and I also had to do a little Googling before, because I did not know what chaos engineering is, but it's essentially doing all your work in a production environment, essentially, which is a little scary, I would say. Yes, Rich? Rich, is creating in a production environment pretty scary?
It is definitely one of those scary things, but it happens on a regular basis on that side of it that's there.
All right. This bad idea, hold on. This bad idea says, and I'm going to have you answer first here, embrace chaos engineering concepts to implement chaos-based access control, which I don't know what exactly that would be. So we would need, whoever said this to explain what that is, instead of essentially role-based access control or ABAC. I don't know what is ABAC? What is it? Access-based access control? What is it?
Typically activity-based access control.
Activity-based access control. Okay. All right. So I need to know from you, Richard, how are you going to beat this bad idea? How are you going to, if you're going to chaos engineering and chaos-based access control, in place, which I can't exactly define what that is. How are you going to control it?
No,
Kevin, that's your idea. Okay. Kevin Hackinson is his idea. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think it's actually pretty interesting from that side of it that's there. And again, you can take the chaos level to the different wings. There are certain groups like Netflix that have built tools just to test and crash things just to see how they recover, and the same thing. So it's actually a good bad idea that's there to say, okay, you're taking the heart of your organization and messing it up. Just imagine, hey, I assign random permissions to everybody's account to see what can actually work and not work in part of that process. Those kind of things make the developers, the operators, and everything else actually understand what permissions are going to be leveraged and used, which ones are important, which ones no one cares about and shouldn't even be provisioned in some of those cases that are actually there. So it would, all the failures and things around that could be generated from that in real time and assessing permissions and just taking them away without testing, you're gonna find out what you need at the end of the day. So the end result will be better than what you have. It will be very, very painful to get through there, but at the end, you'll come out knowing everything that's going on in the environment and what is required to actually make it run.
Well, it looks like you were playing Department of Yes because you really like this idea, so we'll do that. So, Mike, I'm going to let you play this either way. You can play it as Department of Yes or beat the bad idea. Are you going to control this or are you going to embrace this? What's going to happen?
I like it too, and this is why. When you think about in a controlled environment where you have the opportunity to do reverse engineering, fuzzing
but it's
techniques.
Not a controlled environment. That's the thing. Everything's in production.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's the production part that I think, I get a bit uncomfortable about, but the process I think is very practical, very important. It does help uncover things like toxic things, right? So, when we think about access, when we think about hacking cloud and privilege escalation, lateral movement, all of those things we traditionally think about, when people target the environment, doing some of these techniques do uncover some of those toxic combinations of permissions and access and things like that unless exercised, you probably would never know exist within your super sophisticated cloud environment.
Yeah, it's gonna uncover stuff you didn't see before. So, good job on that. All right, second and last one. And again, speak up if this is yours. So we know Kevin Hackinson is the first one. All right, set up CAPTCHA. The CAPTCHA things for all cloud access so that the bad actors get frustrated and simply give up trying to find the fire hydrant. So if you remember, I think this refers to the CAPTCHA where they show you the image of all the photos and you say, click on where all the fire hydrants are. Now, this is designed to essentially thwart the bad actors, but I'm assuming it is also thwarting your own employees. Are you going to beat the bad idea or are you going to embrace it for the Department of Yes? Rich?
Yeah, I think friction is good for your employees and your job reliability on that side of it. I think it's one of the things that if you're doing something, yes, you're secure. Do you have hurdles and everybody else complaining that why do I need that and that side of it? Probably so. It would really depend if it's an internal application or a customer-facing application, I think, for the response of that. Because if you did customer-facing, so what? They're just customers. What do they do for you? On that, make it harder to buy things. Make it harder to buy things on that side of it. So if it's internal employees, hey, security said so you need to do it on that. I don't know what your life expectancy is in an organization like that after you made that rule, but if you don't care, I think it's okay.
All right, he's embracing it. Good job. And we're throwing this to you, Mike. Are you going to embrace it or are you going to try to beat this bad idea?
My response to it is it depends. And I kind of,
it depends doesn't work in this game.
Yeah, I know, right? I had a sense that was coming, right? But I think Richard kind of alluded to that, right? Which is, it does sort of depend on where it is applied, right? On a front-facing application, maybe it makes a lot of sense. For customer support, for other types of things, maybe it doesn't, So I think at the end of the day, I'd have to say no. There's probably better approaches in general if I had to choose one way or the other.
Well, no, but now it's not about choosing one way or the other. It's Are you going to beat the bad idea? So how are you going to beat this bad idea? If this bad idea is actually flourishing in your environment, how are you're stopping the bad actors, but you're also annoying your own employees. So what are you?
Yeah, that's right.
So how are you handling it? Maybe increasing everybody's pay. I don't know, giving them more time off. What are you doing?
So I think you apply it in some circumstances, and then in other cases, maybe you embrace other barriers of authentication, multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication, things like that. So there's, it fits in some places, doesn't fit in other places.
Yeah. All right.
And I think you should add to your security training for this how picture resolution and recognition is there. So pick the fire hydrant, pick the crosswalk, pick the telephone pole, pick the stop sign. Now becomes part of your security education and awareness training of that. You have your own capture phrase in it to help your internal employees.
That is a winning answer. Follow up with you. Good job, Rich. By the way, kudos to both of you. Kudos to both of you. All right. Let me also mention that was Mike K who had that bad idea for the last one. So Mike said we have to go through his capture to get him on video. So let us know what that's going to be. Let me also, and we'll do that around 45 minutes past the hour. Please give us more questions and vote up your favorite questions. We have a couple in here right now. If you have not clicked on the link on the bottom of the screen to register for our video chat, please do that. And please stick around to the very tail end of this, because that link is going to change for our meetup. And by the way, for those of you who've come to our meetups in the past, I want you to know that they have the service we use, which was called Icebreaker, is now called Gather Round. So don't be thrown when you get into the site. It looks slightly different and go, this is an Icebreaker. It's called Gather Round. Well, they just, out of the blue, they changed the name of it. And by the way, I think it's a stupid name. Let me know what you think, because I thought Icebreaker was a better name. But definitely click on that link now to register for next week's video chat, which will be hacking process. All right, back to our questions right now. Let's get to them. This comes from Matthew Bybee, who asks, what are some strategies to manage cloud access when you have multiple cloud service providers, not enough FTEs? Excuse my ignorance here. What does an FTE stand for, Rich?
Full-time employee.
Full-time employee. I should know. That's not a tech term. You do not have enough FTEs to manage it and little to no budget. So it sounds like you got multiple CSPs, not enough money to afford your product, and not enough money to actually have anyone to manage it. So I guess what's the way to deal with this? The answer is you don't, and you get screwed. Yes, Rich?
It gets to be really hard. I think it's one of the things. If you really are struggling with this, you focus on what you can actually do, and if training would be one of the first places I would start in the environments that's there, because my Amazon developers and everything else, they may be able to develop in Google, but they don't know the permissions of that. And then the same goes for Azure and everything else. So make sure they are trained and up to speed on your environments. And if they're bouncing between environments, make sure they're trained on both and potentially certified.
Let me ask you, do either of you know, or speak up in the chat room, how long does that cloud training take? Because as far as I understand, cloud security architects in general, or just having basic cloud management training, is a highly sought after skill. And I know all the providers essentially offer that training for free because they want you to learn their environment. How long does it take? Rich, anybody in the chat room?
It's usually somewhere around 12 weeks, depending on the person.
12 weeks?
It takes a lot, and you get in stacks of certification like anything else. Of like, hey, I'm here, and now I'm a developer. Now I can do stuff. So you typically do that for each one of those. But if I'm having multiple environments, like most organizations too,
so if you're using 3 environments, 24, 30,
you're done for the year.
That's not 12 weeks of full-time training, is it?
It's not necessarily 12 weeks. That's what the typical allocation is, and for what people are doing. And most of the time when my staff is taking some of this, it's on the job kind of thing. So you're parsing off and reading at night and everything else. Some people can do it a lot quicker because a lot of times it's self-paced.
But 36 weeks, you're looking pretty much at a solid year. That's going to turn out to be.
And it's
going to do all 3 environments.
and it is really needed. And that would be the first place that I would actually start. I would look at the second saying, once that's done, now go back to the controls that are native to the cloud environment and understand what those are. Because a lot of times there's lots of controls that they're just not nice and friendly, and you really need to understand what the output is, and you have to grep, odd, set, kind of look through the reports to find the nuggets that you're actually looking for, but the data's there. So the issue is you can do it, but you have to level up your team to be able to do it on that side of it, to do it effectively. And that would be the first thing I would do if I had no budget for tools. Focus on your internal training on that side of it that's there.
Well, Mike, I know this question is not, it doesn't, is telling people to, not buy your product, but then again, if they don't buy your product or they don't have the employees, they're in really tough chase. The cheapest solution, assuming you got all the time in the world, that's the thing. If you got all the time in the world, train all you want, kind of a thing. What would your advice be for this? And while I'm asking you this question, Andrew, please invite on and pay attention, both Kevin Hackinson and Mike Kay to defend their bad ideas. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. So in terms of training, these platforms are very different from one another across the different cloud service providers. And, but what we see, and we go through lots of internal training ourselves, 12 weeks, even longer, depending on whether you want to be an associate, specialized in security, developer certifications, things like that. Many of them have similar paths in terms of the certification process. I think some of it can have a direct impact on how you manage these different environments in a cohesive way, right? The authorization models, the platforms, the controls are very, very different from one another. What we have seen some organizations do is, when we've gone in and done risk assessments and they say, great, you found all kinds of problems, within this environment and then this other different, cloud service provider altogether. How do we manage this in a cohesive way? We see a lot of customers embracing things like Terraform. So if they're building out infrastructure, they can start to create similar ways in which they're doing that within one cloud provider and similarly in another cloud provider in terms of how they do encryption and how they do identity and access management, how they do their configuration management. And from those flows, leverage those similar baselines, even though the language is a bit different between the two of them.
All right, we have both Kevin Hackinson, who's wearing his CISO series jersey because he is a winner of the best bad idea, and Mike is yet to win, but he's wearing a jacket that counts. All right,
I need a new one. This is my second week. I need a new one.
All right, good. So we'll start with you, Kevin. Rich and Mike Rego. The two of you are the judges here. You have to explain why your bad idea is the worst bad idea. I'll start with you, Kevin, and maybe you can explain what this chaos-based access control would actually look like. Is it just literally handing out permissions willy-nilly? Is that the idea?
Yeah. So you had mentioned too, chaos engineering, right? The practice of stressing an application, testing in production by creating disruptive events like changing access control. Because observing how that system responds, that lets you implement improvements. So a chaos access control, as opposed to a role-based or an attribute-based access control, keeps swapping out the permissions on you, right? And it keeps, now all of a sudden you observe the failures from the access control logs, and now you're able to tune and tweak the parameters, figure out which ones you remove you don't need, which ones you do need. App just builds the system. And we know that everything fails all the time. That's how you build highly available systems. So put that on your security.
Again, we think you may have come up with a good idea, but Mike, go ahead.
Just let it break. It can break all the time.
So Mike, we'll throw this to you, and then I want to hear your judgment of the two bad ideas. Go ahead, Mike, defending your bad idea.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good idea, actually. And he already has a shirt. So, second week in a row, my last week.
But hold on. By the way, I want you to know that everybody, even if you want to continue to the end of this chat, is eligible. We do not choose the bad idea until really over the weekend or Monday next week. But go ahead, Mike, go.
No problem. So I'm glad you guys beat my CAPTCHA first. So great job for me to get in here. But I mean, you guys mentioned friction, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing. You don't want to lose clients. You don't want to lose employees either. You don't have to pay them more, which is an interesting idea. But ultimately, if you look online, there are so many ways to beat CAPTCHA, right? So watch the videos, go on YouTube. So it doesn't work, and it's frustrating. So that's my spiel. Thanks, guys.
All right. So Rich, Mike, let's hear from you. Which one of them has the worst idea here?
Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah. You're going back with a good idea and a worst idea. And I'm like, wow, this is hard. I think it's one of the scenarios. For me, I think the CAPTCHA side of it is like, that is the fastest way for my exit of 16 years plus. I can guarantee it wouldn't be 16 days of implementing the CAPTCHA side of it before I would be looking for new opportunities at that point in time.
But will you be looking for new? Maybe not get one because you'd be known as the guy who implemented the CAPTCHA.
Exactly,
Mike. Which so you're voting for Mike K for the best bad idea here. What do you think, Mike Ray? Go.
I would pick the chaos one. To me, that just seems like the basis for getting breached as soon as possible, right? I mean, it's like it's just like taking shots in the dark. It's it just we already know folks are assigning permissions based on just in case access and things like that, not really using any kind of calculated method to really get to zero trust or least privileges or anything like that, right? So this just sounds like the perfect storm to completely destroy all of that.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you, Mike, on this, because what I love about yours, Kevin, is not only is the fastest way to get breached, but it's like rolling the dice. Like, where are you going to get breached? Like, who knows? That's kind of the fun part of it. Like, it could come anyway at this point, because of the chaos access control technique. Anyways, excellent job, Kevin and Mike. Thank you very much. We're just down to our last 9 minutes of the show. Thank you for joining us. All right, with our last 9 minutes, let me ask you one more question, and then we'll make sure that we wrap up. Please, this is only going to be there for a few more minutes. Click on the link at the bottom to register for next week's video chat if you haven't done that already, because I know we have a lot more people on that have not yet registered for next week. So go ahead and please do that. What are your thoughts on having a private peering / AWS direct connect? Excuse me. Let me read this again. What are your thoughts on having a private peering / AWS direct connect / Azure Express route between on-prem and cloud versus let them all take over the public endpoints as that service is in the cloud anyway? Rich, you're laughing on that. I'll let you answer first. Go.
Yeah, no.
No is the answer. Yes.
No is the answer. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Just give me the rationale. Why don't you do something like that?
Typically, a lot of times is that the cloud services do rely upon things still in your data centers, things still in your organizations, authentication, Active Directory, permissions, roles, responsibilities, other pieces of data that may be sensitive that you don't want to put into the cloud, everything else. Trying to tack that up through a VPN that's now encrypted or should be encrypted to your own organization that comes in to now poke a hole in your firewall that's facing the internet to allow access to the crown jewels via the cloud. It's Amazon. So guess what? I allow all Amazon address space, which also includes like 50% hackers and APT actors in the world that have Amazon instances as well, to your network. That doesn't bode well for your success. Instant breach kind of scenario. And there's time and time again where organizations have been ransomware up due to the fact that they compromised their cloud presence and then went into the organization straight in and compromised the organization. You're just opening yourself up to compromises that. The one rule, though, is that connection from the cloud to your internal network should have a firewall in front of it, and it should have rules that do not include any except on things like that. It should be just like your permission of what can access, where can it access from on that side of it that's there. It's much safer, it's much better, and the same would be between you. If you're cross-connecting clouds, the same structure exists on the same side of that. Do not try to go and magically make it, hey, we'll just do everything through the internet, because you're just asking for problems at that point in time.
All right, Mike, 30-second answer on this same question, if you can, and then we're going to go into our wrap-up or your final comments and final advice. Go ahead, Mike.
Sure. Definitely a no. Why? SolarWinds, right? We saw, I mean, we saw, pivoting from on-prem to the cloud and vice versa, across Microsoft on-prem to Azure and back, right? Through Azure AD in the cloud role assignment rights. That was prescriptive advice from Microsoft exactly for that reason.
Okay, excellent advice. All right, we are now going into the end of the video chat. We just have 5 minutes, and I just essentially want your final advice for the people who are essentially not doing this, who are dealing with the manual explosion of all these access levels, all the vectors, like you described at the very beginning of the show, all the different people, the different permissions, and the changing permissions. I want your final advice on how to address this. And also, Mike, please feel free to give an offer to the audience if you'd like for something, if they want to explore more about CloudKnox. Andrew, please change the link at the bottom of the screen to our meetup that will happen afterwards. Anybody can go ahead and click on that button before. Oh, and also, we didn't mention this before. Rich and Mike, you're going to click on the link in the back channel. Don't click on the link in the bottom. Click on the link in the back channel. But go ahead and click on that now. You can do that now, actually, and we will we'll join that immediately when this is over. All right, now we only have 4 minutes left. I'm sorry for all that talking. Excuse me. I do have to share the screen and just do one quick thing. Share my screen and remind you. Actually, we have. Where is my? There it is. Where is? Here we go. Here it is. Boom. All right, stick around for the meetup. Click the link at the bottom. All right, tell all your friends to join us. It's every Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. We definitely want your friends to join us. Thank you to CloudKnox for sponsoring this very video chat. We greatly, greatly appreciate it, and thank you for being a repeat sponsor of the CISO series. And if you would like to sponsor a video chat, well, just email me at david@cisoseries.com. I believe we have last 2 weeks of June available right now, our next ones that are available. So with that said, now I will go to you, Mike. Any final thoughts? And please, in less than a minute, give you final thoughts and any offer that you would like to give to our audience as well.
Sure. So I'll try to give you kind of the non, vendor type answer here, even though, I work for CloudKnox and we're sponsoring the event. That is
quite all right.
Yeah. And that is, we do risk assessments day in and day out. And we see, that every organization is challenged in terms of identifying, where they've got inactive users that are sitting out there that are no longer being used, right? All of those identities and roles and more. Additionally, we find lots of folks that have all types of super user root type permissions that the organization didn't realize they have because the permissions are really sophisticated and difficult to understand. And furthermore, really across all the risk assessments, we see a byproduct of that, which is all the toxic combination of permissions that could allow a lot of these different identities, both human and service accounts, to escalate privileges, move laterally around, and really be used in the wrong hands to really breach the environment or insider threat. So at the end of the day, getting that visibility, as we mentioned earlier, and using that to calculate least privileges, get rid of all those unnecessary permissions, is really a good starting point in leveraging activity to really calculate least privileges.
Excellent advice. And with 1 minute, let's hear it. Rich, what's your last final advice?
Do not walk, run to the cloud. And I mean that from the presence that are actually there. If you're not in the cloud today, you will be in it next year or the following year. And if you have to start in the cloud, it's going to take you about a year to get everything up to your norm that you have in the data center. So if the business decides to say, hey, you're spending way too much money on Amazon, you need to switch to one of these other, like Bill and Ted's Excellent Cloud Service or something like that, guess what? You're going to have to move, and you need to get in the environment. So not just pick one of the clouds, pick a couple of the clouds that you are highly likely that you're going to be in at some level, shape, or form, and get the training, get the ways, understand how you're going to operate in that environment. Because if you don't, they're going to expect you to start from day one. And it says, hey, it takes about 30 days to roll the application up and it should be live. And you're going to be doomed to failure at that point in time. You will be looking for the next opportunity at that point. So run to the cloud.
All right, good advice. Run to the cloud. I believe we have people who are embracing the cloud who are in the chat room already. Thank you very much, Mike Rago, who is with Cloud Knox, and Richard Rushing, who is the CISO over at Motorola Mobility. Thank you to the audience. We have just a few seconds left. Please click the link at the very bottom of the screen to join us for the meetup. If you've never done this before, or you've been hesitant about doing it before, stop. Don't be hesitant. Come join us. You're going to see how much fun it is. This is a great group of people. I love meeting with them every week. It's a ton of fun. So join us. Click the link at the bottom. Thank you to Andrew. Thank you to everybody else. Join us next week as well. Tell all your friends. And if you want to sponsor, let me know. Take us out. Bye.